If you're thinking of playing Path of Exile, follow a guide. Sorry, forgot to start with an intro. Quick, roll the intro clip. Hey, new guy! Aw, don't you look all sweet and innocent, untainted by the sweaty, rage-inducing, seasonal grindfest that is Path of Exile. I'm so glad you're thinking of joining our community. Now, before you start playing the game with us, let me ask you a question so I can better guide you into playing the right way. Question 1 of 1. Do you want to play Path of Exile Hardcore Blind Death Metal Rage Mode? Or do you want to play Path of Exile Character Building Simulator? What's the difference? Let me tell you. My name is AllTradesJack, and if you've watched any of my other 4 PoE videos, you know that I was a Path of Exile casual player who enjoyed the game without following a guide or looking up builds or basically understanding the game. I tried to learn all the mechanics and character building using the tools available to me within the game, which isn't that much. I'm a lot older now. The past year has aged me and my mind has expanded to understand the true greatness of the sheer amount of content that Path of Exile has to offer. But the only reason I'm able to stand here today and tell you my story as a Path of Exile player is because of a life-changing event I call following a guide. In this video, I plan on helping any new and casual players like myself understand that it's okay to start playing PoE with a build guide. There is so much more to learn, and following a guide is basically the only way to play the game with the foundational knowledge required to succeed. There are 2 games called Path of Exile. One game you play before you look up a guide, and one you play while following a guide. They are so different, it really could be called Path of Exile 1 and 2, and the new one coming out sometime in the future should be number 3. Honestly, I can't decide which game I like better. Playing Path of Exile without a guide is kind of freeing. It has this open feeling of possibility and a constant state of learn, adapt, and overcome. But the problem comes with the frustration of constantly hitting that progression wall. You will learn, eventually, but eventually is a really long time. And getting to new popular content is entirely dependent on you getting to that eventuality. It took me roughly 300 hours and 5 characters to get to Tier 6 or Yellow maps. 300 hours to get to the first Maven challenge. After that, I burned out. I practically skipped the Lake of Kalandra season and was gonna skip the current season, the Forbidden Sanctum, but I didn't like that I lost any motivation to jump back into the game. Path of Exile is fun. It's tough and complicated, and most people barely get through the tutorial, but it's fun. So I decided that to get myself motivated again, it was time to make a change. This season, I followed a guide. I built a poisonous concoction pathfinder, and it opened up a whole new game. About 90% of what I learned on my own was covered in this build. All of that trial and error, those 300 hours, made unnecessary in a single 6-step build. On my last character, getting through the campaign, through white maps into Tier 6 yellow maps, took about 80 hours of play. I was fumbling around with my build. I was trying to get enough currency to constantly recraft my items to hit my resist caps and get more than 3,000 health. I was trying to gain enough experience to offset how much I was losing by dying all the time. Not only was building my character hard, but I had no clue how to interact with any of the extra content that could help me along the way. What are these splinters for? What the heck is this interrogation kill thingy, and what should I unveil? Why does this guy keep wanting me to kill pests in his garden? Without a guide, you're left to figure out all of this on your own, and I would consider most of this, with the exclusion of the side content, the base knowledge that you need to play the game. So my new experience with a guide meant that the campaign, irrelevant. It's not even part of the game really, it's basically just a tutorial and a way to get extra passive skill points. I practically cruised through the first 5 tiers of white maps with only a little bit of an adjustment to my build. I completed the last labyrinth and got my last ascendancy points. I even got to the first Maven Arena challenge and beat that first try. I got a quest for the Searing Exarch. Who is that? Don't know. I didn't read the little expository paragraph about him, but I'm past level 80 and now I can start playing the game. It's at this point that I ran into new problems, ones that I had never reached before because I had burnt myself out on building a viable character. But before I get to that, I want to reiterate how different the game experience is with and without a guide. The guide itself taught me everything I needed to know on how to build a poisonous concoction pathfinder. Step by step, skill point by skill point, it told me which gems to use and which supports I needed at which time. It told me how to use aura skills and manage my mana with reservation masteries. It told me exactly what rewards to get from each quest so that I could get through the campaign the fastest. It told me when to go to the labyrinths to get my ascendancy points. Most importantly, for everything that I did, it told me why. And that's something you can't get from the game. Why do you need a 6-link body armor as fast as possible? That's pretty self-explanatory, but it's because it nearly doubles your damage output from a 4-link. Why did I get damage over time, chance to poison on hit, and attack speed nodes on the passive skill tree? Well, that's because poison scales with chaos damage over time, and can stack, meaning you want to hit fast and apply poison with every hit. Why do you want to buff your life flasks, have 2 of them, and constantly increase your ability to gain flask charges? Well, Poisonous Concoction takes charges off your life flasks in order to deal more damage. That damage scales with the amount of health recovered by the flask, so you want to have a flask that can heal as much as possible and uses the least amount of charges so you don't get caught unable to heal yourself. Yes, you can figure this out in the game using the descriptions that GGG gives you, but when you are learning as you go, it could take years to optimize the 400 node skill tree to hit mana reservation, chaos damage, poison on hit, shield mastery, life, leech, and onslaught nodes all at once, using the most efficient path to get there. It could take years to figure out that you can have 3 different auras, 2 different poison and 3 different hex application methods, an absorption shield, a shield charge for movement, and an enrage buff, all that work together to create this perfect mix of offensive and defensive qualities. I wouldn't even have put 2 and 2 together and thought, hey, you know what would be a good build? If I threw away my weapon and decided to huck bottles of poison at my enemies from behind a massive shield. This is called optimization, and it's something that usually takes a level of understanding beyond that of a normal person. I've said it before in my other videos, but people who make build guides are brilliant. The level of game intelligence it must take to figure out all of this stuff to an extent that you can optimize it and make it efficient to play is insane. And you know what's even crazier? Even after reading this build guide and being directed on how to engage with character building, there is still about 50% of the game that I have no clue about. I still don't know who the Searing Exarch is, or how his influence on certain map tiers affects me. I've beat the Maven Challenge 3 times, but I don't know what these Maven Challenge recipes are on the map device. I just got the Eater of Worlds quests, and I have no clue what he or she does. I have just barely understood the altars that pop up in your maps that you can spend points on to get extra rewards. It's such a weird feeling to have followed a guide and still be a beginner. But I guess that's what really cements it for me. Most people say that new players should follow a guide on their first playthrough, and after seeing how the game is when playing without a build guide, in contrast to how the game is when playing with a build guide, my advice is this. Do you want to have fun exploring the campaign and building characters that fit your fantasy? Or do you want to play Path of Exile? In all seriousness, if you have any intention of getting a character past white maps in the endgame, you should follow a build for your first time. It's not that I don't like learning on my own through trial and error, but trust me when I say that there is so much more to learn even while following a guide. A guide just allows you to get to the point where you can see any of this endgame content. Even with a guide, I haven't been able to get to tier 16 maps yet. I'm sure I can, but I've spent around 90 hours on this character, and I'm raiding in WoW, and I'm playing more games for upcoming reviews, and I'm trying to get back into rugby shape. If the season ends and I haven't made it to tier 16 maps, well, standard will have to do. There are definitely upsides and downsides to following a guide. Path of Exile is just such a huge game that without a guide, there's a very, very low chance that a new player will ever experience the later half of it. So really, I'll say this again and again because it bears repeating, the question comes down to, what is your goal in Path of Exile? Now that I've been on both sides of this debate, I don't think following a guide is as harmful as I expected to the idea of exploration and experiencing the fun of learning on your own. It feels kind of like a graduation. Now that you've gone through the work to learn how to build a semi-viable character, here's a guide you can follow so you don't have to worry about that anymore and move on to more complicated things. Before I had a guide, I was learning and playing the base game. How do the base mechanics and stats work with the character? All my trial and error, all that exploration of what works and what different skills do, what armor works best for what type of build, all of that could be summed up as the first 20% of the game. So then I followed a guide. I spent 10 minutes reading through it and learning what the different terminology was. I learned what it was asking me to do and when, and now I can play the rest of the 80%. And let me tell you, just because I'm following a build now, doesn't mean I'm good at the game, or can make this unbelievably unbeatable character. The Poisonous Concoction build has weaknesses, and it's up to me to be able to alter my armor and gameplay to make up for those weaknesses. I still need to know how to craft and use currency correctly and a bunch more things. I'm still constantly learning new things as I play, things that a build guide doesn't outright tell you. It just gives a foundation on which I can start playing the game, a foundation that is almost a necessity. Once you get to these higher levels, the game is extremely hectic. I'll just come right out and say it. I don't even see my character anymore. I just see a bunch of pretty flashing colors and moving blurs on the screen when things die around me. There is no discernible gameplay other than to move as much as possible and do enough damage that you can kill things before they overwhelm you. Plenty of times I've gotten to the point where there are just so many things on the screen and so many calculations happening at once that my computer almost explodes. And it's kind of fun for the most part. It just sort of amplifies a couple of the problems that I had before. I'm still confused as to why I die, but now it just happens faster and there are more factors affecting my death. I'm still confused as to how some of the buffs and debuffs on monsters work, but now every map has a much longer list of monster changing attributes. But with the foundation that the guide has given me, I feel much more prepared to learn these things on my own. Maybe for a little while anyway before I go look it up on the wiki. One guide later and my understanding of the game has far exceeded that of last season. And like I said, if I had more time in my life, I could keep progressing. I know I'm not that far from tier 16 maps, there are more passive skill points that I want to spend on my guy to make him even stronger, and I really want to beat an endgame boss. I did actually beat this one boss that shows up in the Abyssal Depths. That was extremely fun, so it makes me want to see how awesome the other fights are. Watching my gameplay back, I feel like it would be so confusing to anyone starting the game. That's how I was when I first started. I would look at gameplay like this and be like, what the actual fuck is going on? And now, after having played for over 400 hours, my only critique for Path of Exile is that it's hostile to new players, your CPU, and potentially light or color sensitive people. And to you, my dear viewers, my only question to you this time is, any suggestions for my next build? But most importantly, I hope you enjoy the video. Making Path of Exile videos is extremely time consuming, but it's definitely the series that I enjoy the most. I appreciate you all for watching. Remember to leave a like and comment, and sub if you haven't already. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Sanctum League, and I can't wait to see what we talk about next.